Chapter 17. Nahlis knew that he should have been assisting with the evacuation. The entire enclave was consumed by it. Now that Sleepless, or Scylla Horus as the news was calling her, had made herself famous by dying in such spectacular fashion, Yostin was howling for Sith blood, and the Republic was on the hunt. Her sacrifice had backfired. That meant it was time for the Sith to load up what few space-worthy ships they had and evacuate. The half-finished battleship Scythe was to be abandoned. The training grounds were to be abandoned too, as was the lair, the command center, and everything else the Sith had so laboriously carved out for themselves in Pigton's Landing. Nahlis sat in the command room of the hangar, watching as Sith warriors, troopers, servants, and droids piled into the second-to-last ship that would leave Yostin. Even from his distance, he could sense their tension. Yostin had become home to them, and now it was being taken away. Defeat and exile had taught Nahlis how to cope, but for many of the younger Sith, who had joined after the war, this was their first time fleeing from anywhere. They did not suffer it well. Warriors elbowed each other aside and jockeyed for space, and spats broke out. Items too big to fit on the ship were thrown into heaps on either side of the boarding ramp. Next to Nahlis, in the command room, Darth Umber was not suffering it well either. He said nothing, but Nahlis could feel the frustration boiling within him. On a day like this, the first person to cross him might just pay with his life. Indeed, there was much to do, and Nahlis knew that he should have been contributing. But he could not bring himself to care. He only sat in the traffic controller's chair and stared down at the tablet in his hand. The screen showed a photograph of Sleepless sparring with a younger apprentice. The picture showed her at her best, empowered by inner turmoil rather than weakened by it, disciplined, fierce, and focused. "Nahlis," said Darth Umber, "you idle." "I do, my lord. My arrangements have already been made." "Something troubles you, and it is not our present flight." Nahlis pursed his lips tightly. He was in no mood for another of Umber's interrogations, but Umber perennially demanded to know what his underlings were thinking, and today, of all days, was no day to deny him. "My student has been slain." "You brought her to me so that you might re-earn your place as a Sith Master, and a Sith Master you remain. To you, she has served her purpose." "Nonetheless, I have lost something." He put away the tablet and rested his elbows on his knees, interlacing his fingers. "In times of peace, we Sith most often die at each other's hands. It is, I know, how we keep each other strong and alert and weed out the complacent. I accepted long ago that my killer would most likely be a fellow Sith." He sighed. "But I wanted it to be her. I imagined that one day she would challenge me for my title and strike me down, and then live on as a testament to my skill as a teacher. But now that will never be, because she has been taken from me." "Her carelessness brought us to the attention of the authorities. Without her, the scythe would be ours to keep. She does not deserve your sorrow, or anyone else's." Nahlis had a thought. It came unbidden, but with such force that it consumed him. "Some day, my lord, you will pay for destroying my legacy." Del Horus eased himself down in the chair of the library lounge and queued up a book on his tablet. With his volunteer duties finished, he had a few hours' rest before it would be time to go home and sleep. Tomorrow, he would have to be alert, because immediately after work would come his next meeting with the support group for recovering alcoholics. In the years since Scylla's disappearance, Del had slowly, painfully clawed his way to sobriety, and he owed his success to their understanding and encouragement. And now that Scylla had reappeared and done the terrible thing she did on the prairie, the group meant more to him than ever, because they did not judge him for what his daughter had done. On the contrary, they understood his shame and grief, and they shared it. "Hey," said a male voice. Hi, Del Horace?" Del looked up to see a strong-jawed young man next to a tall woman who wore an opaque space helmet. He was not sure he liked the look of these strangers, so he said, "He's here, but why do you want to meet him?" "Well," said the young man, "I want to talk to him because I knew Scylla Horace before all the bad stuff happened, and I think her dad and I are on the same side here." Del looked around. This was not a conversation to have in public, but then again, they weren't in public. The lounge was empty except for him. The young man read Del's expression and got a knowing look. "You are Mr. Horace, aren't you? My name's Jamar Rhodes. Hi." Del shook his hand. Jamar itched the back of his head. "Look, I don't really know how to say this. Making people feel better was always Garissa's thing, but I was Scylla's boyfriend once, back in Pigton's Landing. But then she kidnapped my cousin, and she tried to do something to me. But I'm not mad at her. Not really. I mean..." He stopped short again. "My point is, someone taught her how to use a lightsaber. She didn't turn into a Sith all on her own, right? Someone must have made that happen. And that someone is still out there." Del gestured to a chair across from him. "Maybe you two should have a seat." Jamar and the woman sat down, and he continued, "I think we can find out where my cousin is, and if she's still alive. I think we can find out where the Sith are hiding, and if we do that, we can smoke them out." The woman came in. "And if we smoke them out, then what happened here will not happen again." Del faced the woman. "I suppose you lost someone too?" he sighed. "Thankfully, I have not. But if I kill a Sith and bring their lightsaber back home with me, my bloodline will be the envy of the whole clan." Del turned up his empty palms. "Well, what do you want my help for? I'm a canner." He laughed. "I'm useless." Jamar shrugged. "Yeah, well, I work in an avionics factory." He gestured to the woman. "Aliz here has been giving me some pointers on shooting and tactics and stuff, but that's not what's important." Jamar got a sincere, wounded look in his eye. "I knew Scylla. So did you. I think, if we look at where she's been, we can retrace what she did, and then we can find out where the Sith are, or where they've gone. And then we can tell the Republic, and then something good can come out of this whole mess." Del thought on this. It would be an interruption of his routine and the simple life he had finally settled into. It would be stressful, and stress was dangerous. But the masked woman had a point. Although Scylla was dead, there were other lost young people out there, people whom the Sith would find and corrupt as they had with her. Unless someone put a stop to it. It would be the best thing he could do for Scylla's memory. It would be what Kriana would have wanted. Del put away his tablet. "I guess I'll do it." In the back of his mind, Keither had known this day would probably come. The Jedi Council had summoned him. Their explanation was sparse on details, and he had not asked, but it was well known that the Council rarely summoned Jedi to commend them. They had done that a standard year ago when they recognized him and Master Stritt for their courage on Yostin, but Keither, thankfully, had not been in the middle of a catastrophe like that ever since. If the Council wanted him again, this could only be bad. Doubtlessly, some of his heretical ideas had made their way to the Jedi authorities. Whoever had talked, Keither did not blame them. He had not been especially guarded with his opinions. A small part of him, he supposed, had hoped the Council would hear them and be sympathetic. Walking the halls of the temple made him feel younger, in a good way. The cool, damp air, the sweet smell of the flower gardens, the statues, the mystical decorations and the sheer quietness of all the other Jedi reminded him of the boyhood he had spent vaulting through obstacle courses, honing his powers with the Force, play-fighting with the other boys and girls, and learning the lore of Jedi heroes whose legacy he was sure he would one day honor with great deeds of his own. He tried to reassure himself. To be expelled from the Jedi Order would not change everything. Surely, the Jedi would not go to the extreme of cutting off his connection to the Force. They would only take away his weapon and his funding. He did not need the first one, and he could replace the latter simply by asking for donations. It was a prospect he did not relish, but it would work. Another Jedi, a knee-high, four-armed woman with an angelic voice, waited by the entrance to the auditorium. "Master Sry, welcome!" She walked through a door in the side of the hallway. "This way, please." "To the audience section?" he asked, bewildered. "Of course," she smiled. "Where else? To the swimming pool?" So, he was not on trial. Then why summon me, he wondered. He got his answer when he took his seat and found Master Stritt at the podium. His stomach felt cold and heavy. What had she done? The head of the council began a long, formulaic announcement, and Keither almost didn't listen until he realized that she was not reciting the preamble to a trial. Instead, the speech ended with the words, "Master Carlotta Stritt has requested our ears to detail her resignation from the Jedi Order. Let us all hear our sister speak." The audience was stunned. A few of the Jedi next to him looked at him for explanation, but he was as much at a loss as they were. "Thank you, Grand Master," said Master Stritt. "And thank you to all of you who have gathered to hear me. I only wish I were not about to answer this courtesy by telling you all something you do not wish to hear. But no Jedi may turn her back on her brothers and sisters without explanation, and you deserve the truth, so I will tell it. What happens when we see our students in danger? When we suffer a premonition of evil? When we lose one of our own? We feel fear, dread, and sadness. On the other hand, when a master sees her Padawan succeed for the first time, what do we feel? What happens when a sage opens up our understanding of the universe, and we become enlightened in a way in which we would not have without their wise guidance? And what does it inspire in us when we see ordinary people's lives bettered by the things we do? We feel pride. We feel gratitude. We feel love. But the Jedi teachings would have us believe that all those things constitute passion and attachment, and that passion is evil. On a planet far, far away, a wise man told me that we cannot choose not to feel these things, but only to repress them. I have come to believe that he was right. I have found that it is impossible to repress my urges to cherish and protect those around me, and to fear the dangers of the galaxy outside, and by combing the archives, I have found that the sages of our ancient past have at times felt the same and are unashamed of it. Nor should they be. Do not misunderstand me. There are things we can do, motivated by our emotions and drives, that are evil. Our forebears were absolutely right to condemn the Sith for the evils they have committed for power, for revenge, and even for love. But the griefs and hungers that they felt did not make them evil. They themselves did that, through actions rather than thoughts. We are told that to have passionate thoughts is wrong, that to speak them aloud is tantamount to doing them, and that evil actions are merely the next inevitable step in the path. But I have found that speaking our feelings aloud, sharing our loves, hopes, and even our fears, is where we can most easily turn away from the path to evil. It is where we are able to connect with others, console them, and set them on the right path. We Jedi know this. We practice confessions, and seek advice from our elders, and debate elaborately about our feelings,
because we know that those feelings are important enough to discuss and judge, rather than simply ignore. We act as if we do not know this, but we do know it. We are told, correctly, that we are not soldiers, and yet we are expected to be as ruthless as soldiers. If you learned that your Padawan's own sister was in deadly peril, would you have him stand by and continue his training, knowing that his kin will soon perish? Or would you have him harness his latent filial love and do what he can to save her? The Jedi would decide on the former, and such treatment is inhumane. I can no longer teach these ethics to our children in good conscience, nor can I live by them. That is why, in all gratitude for the good things you have taught me, done for me, and allowed me to do for others, and in all humility as merely another learner in the school of life, I ask permission to give back my lightsaber and my title as Jedi Master, and to seek my own life in the wider galaxy. All heads turned toward the council, who were unready for the prompt. Nonetheless, the head of the council spoke up and said, "Permission is granted, although it was never ours to withhold. No Jedi can be forced to remain in the Order. But we beg you to reconsider, Master Strit, for the sake of your students." "Why is that?" asked Master Strit with a wry smile. "Because they would miss me? Perhaps they are even attached to me, as I am to them. Indeed, I will be sorry to say goodbye to them, but I have trained my assistant to replace me, and I assure you she is ready." Keither searched the audience for Master Strit's teaching assistant, a mild-mannered Kaminoan, and saw her covering her mouth in shock. Apparently, her training had not included a warning that this day would come. But Keither had no doubt she was ready. He knew that Master Strit was the finest mentor anyone could hope for. "My decision," Master Strit went on, "has been a long time coming, and I am quite firm in it. It warms my heart that I will be missed, and were it permitted, I would gladly visit and correspond." That precipitated an uncomfortable silence. "But instead, I will be content with merely an amicable goodbye." The head of the council responded with more formulaic words, and it became clear that she had nothing more to say to change Master Strit's mind. Somehow, Keither had expected that this would all turn out to be a joke, a stunt calculated to prove a point. It would have been completely unlike his old master, but to leave the council was even more so. It was drastic, romantic, and adventurous, all things she was not. Master Strit began to turn away from the podium, but then stopped and said, "Oh, and there is one other thing. Please tell Master Zephyr that he is the most attractive and charming man I have ever met." The right side of her mouth quirked up in a smirk. "I waited 30 years to say that." There was nothing more to say. The ceremony ended, and as the Jedi filed out of the auditorium, they raised a hushed murmur as they whispered to each other. "Master Sry," said the old human man next to him, "did you have any idea she would do this?" "I'm surprised by all of it," Keither replied. "I fear that perhaps Master Strit interpreted our code more stringently than we did. Obsession is one thing, but all of us are brothers and sisters, and we share a connection as such. That is not wrong." "She was not the only one who interpreted our code strictly," came a scratchy but mild voice. Keither turned his head to see Carlota's confidant, the abbess, speaking. "Thrice she was censured for excessive closeness with her peers. 2 of those censures I strongly disagreed with." "Why worry so about her feelings?" Still another voice came in. "She seems to think she was keeping them secret, but we all could sense her emotions, as she could sense ours." A pause. "Couldn't she?" "What is strangest to me," said the old man, "was her comment about Master Zephyr. I never saw those 2 in the same room." Keither shrugged. "If you were in her place, wouldn't you avoid him? My master was trying to follow the rules. But that is asking the impossible." "Dad," said Wyrus, "you met a Jedi, right? What was he like?" Sheriff Jonin Hanks thought on that. It was a good question. His daughter was full of those. "It was a crazy time," said Sheriff Hanks. "And not just because of the Jedi. You gotta understand, I wasn't even sheriff back then. That was still your grandfather's job. I was brand new, so everything was strange to me. But let me see if I can remember." Wyrus waited patiently. The way they talked was one thing. They didn't just think something and say it. No, there was always something in between, as if... well, I'm not sure what, but you could tell they did a lot more thinking than talking. It's a habit I've tried to pick up for myself. The Bothan fellow, the healer, it always seemed to bother him that he couldn't do everything. It's strange. He could do more by laying his hands on somebody than an entire surgery team could do, and yet he always seemed frustrated that he couldn't do more. It was never, "I can heal people, that's amazing." No, he was so concerned about the ones he couldn't save. That was always where his mind was. Guess it's just in our nature. "He's the one who fixed your chest, right?" "Yeah, you remember." And he wasn't the only one I met. There was a human, too. From Yostin, actually. Hanks looked out the window at the rising sun. That Yostin had a Jedi, that wasn't even the strangest thing I learned about her. The healer was her apprentice, and the healer had a pilot. I guess he didn't know how to fly himself, and that pilot and I wrote to each other a lot after we first met. Every once in a while we meet for whiskey and Pazak and catch up on things. He visited here once, while you were very little. Do you remember that? A short fellow, with arms where his legs should have been? Wyrus shook her head. I should really write to him again. Anyway, what he told me was that the human Jedi, she quit. She quit what? She quit being a Jedi. But how do you quit that? I didn't know they were allowed. But what Rolls told me was she just went to the head Jedi and said, I don't want to be one anymore. Here's my lightsaber back. And she went off to who knows where to do who knows what. Wow. Wow is right. I don't know if she even got to say goodbye to Keither, either. And they don't let them talk anymore. He shook his head. When you're a Jedi, a master's like a mama. Can you imagine that? Your own mama, and she's not allowed to talk to you. Wow. Yeah. Jonan rested an elbow on the windowsill, contemplating the vastness of the prairie, and everything beyond it. Wish I knew what happened to her. Keither had been too young to participate in the last war against the Sith. As such, he imagined he would go his whole life without infiltrating any place. And yet here he was. Rolls? He asked. How certain are we that this is the place? If this isn't it, boss, I'll eat my own shoes. You don't wear shoes. I know, I'm hedging my bets. Well, it changes nothing. Slowly, silently, the ship descended towards an empty plain under the cover of a moonless night, and halted several 100 feet above the ground. Mirren, said Keither, send out the spy droid. Yes, master, said the Nautolan girl behind him. Keither had delegated all responsibility over the spy droid to his new Padawan, and he waited eagerly to see how well she did. As she flicked on the droid's master power switch, he braced himself to hear sparks, or a dead silence. Instead, the droid hummed to life. With a whoop of delight, Mirren snatched up the droid and pitched it out the window. The audio feed is live, she said. It works! You should have checked that before you deployed it. Oh. Now. Keither leaned out the door and put the binoculars to his eyes. Let's see if my guess was right. Far below, he saw a curved grid of feedlots, running grounds and pastures for animals, with wood and wire fences strung around them, and beaten dirt paths between them. A little downhill from the cattle grounds, a hover tractor ambled into a vehicle shed, having apparently finished its work on a bare field behind it. On a hill, there was a house. Keither zoomed in. Now he could see shade trees, and a few parked hover scooters, and even what looked like children's toys scattered in front of the house. In corners that would have been shaded from the afternoon sun, snow piled high, even though the grass was green and flourishing everywhere else. The lights in the house were on. Keither zoomed in. Through a bay window, Keither saw a family of humans gathered around a dark wooden table, milling around each other and trading dishes, evidently setting up a family meal. That was unsurprising. Humans, he knew, did not customarily eat alone. But after a little more observation, he saw that they were taking dishes away from the table. They were finishing, not starting. He zoomed in a little further and started to make out faces. None looked familiar, but at the same time they all did. All had straight, dark hair and tan skin and thin frames. They all walked the same too, taking long, slow, loping strides. All except for one woman. One woman always looked before she turned, put her feet down gently, and kept her back immaculately straight. Just as Keither got a good view of her, the probe droid drew close enough to an open window that the audio feed started to come through. "Wait!" said a child, shuffling up beside the straight-backed woman. "You can't fix the refrigerator. You promised me you'd tell me a bedtime story." The voice of Carlotta Stritt answered her. "All in due time, little Zia." "But Grandma said it would take all night." Carlotta walked away from the window, out of Keither's field of view, but he could still hear her gently set down the metal tray full of utensils. "It may take all night, or it may take minutes. If it is long work, then I fear I will have to break my promise to you, and I am sorry. Can you be a big girl and tuck yourself into bed?" "Okay," said the girl sadly, as she took a plate handed to her by an older man and began to shuttle it back to where Carlotta stood. "It is simple to sleep," said Carlotta. "Only clear your mind of all thoughts and lights out." There was a pulse in the force, and the girl's hair suddenly flew in front of her face, as if on a breeze. "Hey!" the girl shrilled. Carlotta laughed. The girl fought to clear the hair from her eyes, which was not easy with her hands full, and as soon as she managed it, her hair flipped over her face again. "Mom!" yelled the girl through giggles. "Make Aunt Carly stop!" "Carly?" came a voice like Carlotta's, but younger, unhurried, and in the smooth, lazy-lipped Yostin accent. "I didn't realize you told Zia you'd read to her. Why don't I have a look at the cooler instead?" "Are you certain? I have not done my fair share of the mechanical work." "Carly, life's not all about that. Go and read Zia her story. Leave the fixing to me." "Thank you." Zia said nothing, but Keither could see she was watching them talk, and she moved with a little more spring in her step as she took a few plates off the hands of a struggling sibling and hustled them back to the kitchen. Keither let down his binoculars. "Is it her?" asked Mirren. "Recall the probe droid. We're done here." He put his binoculars away. "Carlotta Stritt lives in that house. We have violated her privacy, and I am ashamed." "Hey," Rolls offered. "This mission was the Council's idea, not ours." "The Council was certain that I would find Master Stritt regretting her decision to leave." They'd been so certain they had ordered him to investigate, even though that skirted the Jedi stricture against contact with outsiders. Their use of the probe droid had been their attempt to interfere as little as possible. They were wrong. "So you don't want to knock on the door? I mean, as long as we're already here." "There's no need. The Jedi wanted to know if she wished to come back, and I have their answer." He took one last, fond look at the farm, which would have to do for a goodbye. "My old master is exactly where she belongs." The end.